essentially Bitcoin is what Christine Lagarde called the escape hatch.
Hi, Pablo.
Right.
How are you doing?
Pretty good, Robin. Pretty good. Just starting out a brand new day here in Quebec. I'm back home. It's nice to be home. I've been traveling this summer. There's been some great events going on. Been super happy to be meeting so many Bitcoiners, seeing what's happening in different places, but also happy to get back home and work on what's to come because there's a lot of good stuff to come. So it's good to be back in front of the computer, take some time to debrief and look to the next chapter.
Yeah, it's like those traveling times are super busy, and like I really like also when I come home from a lot of traveling to just like have a month where I don't travel, like just like have like a month full of days where I just like wake up and go to bed at the same in the same bed and don't like wake up and it's like, oh, like I'm traveling here. But you learn a lot, and I've seen you, I think, in El Salvador. I've seen you definitely in El Salvador. I saw you, and I saw you in Dublin, and you were also in Prague. So you're traveling to a lot of different places, and I just thought about that. Like, how do you see how different countries and how different kind of cultures are looking at Bitcoin? Do you see any difference between like Latin America, Europe, like Canada, and all the different places that you kind of seen?
Yeah. Yeah, I do think there's big differences. It's obviously, first of all, I'm going to make the mistake of generalizing countries and how they adopt Bitcoin. But we kind of have to be aware of how globally this global currency is being adopted in different ways. So putting them into baskets of countries, cultures, languages kind of does make a bit of sense. It's something we're having to be aware of here at Bull Bitcoin as we expand out of Canada into Costa Rica, Mexico, and now Europe. And then hopefully further in the next few weeks, months, days, years, um, is how do people see Bitcoin? Because there's, the white paper pretty much just explained what Bitcoin was, but didn't tell you how to see it. So interpretation is really open. Some people see Bitcoin through a totally different lens than I would, than you would. And it's not just dependent on where they come from. It's who they are, what their background is. But where they're from does have a good play in it. And you can pick that up when you go traveling. When you go to different events, there's different vibes, really. You know what I mean? There's a different energy, a different kind of perspective, a different drive. Some people are pushing different things to do with Bitcoin because it's so vast as well. There's everything we can do to help Bitcoin adoption. We can be working for different businesses, developing different tools, working in different ways to help this flourish. So as a general rule, what I kind of saw the first time I got to really travel with Bitcoin was meeting you in El Salvador as well. So I'd always wanted to go there because they were, famously Bitcoin country. And as we've seen in the past few weeks, that narrative um, slowly kind of degrading, shall we say. But in terms of like the hope and the boots on the ground and the grassroots kind of adoption, like especially on a merchant basis, especially with lots of people moving there and feeling that kind of passion of Bitcoin expats. And it was very much, it's a happening kind of vibe. El Salvador. A lot of excitement, a lot of energy, a lot of like this is ground zero, and all based around a nation state. So that was interesting. But also they're also focusing on helping people who are victims of the dollar, who are potentially unbanked. So that was kind of the focus in El Salvador. But then when I went to somewhere like Prague recently, Prague's totally different energy as well. First of all, it's multi-nation. There's a lot of people from all the different surrounding areas to Czech Republic, but I kind of noticed Prague had, with the people I was hanging out with, a really good cypherpunk kind of approach. Very much about tools for privacy. So that was like a different kind of Bitcoiner. We had an amazing cypherpunk event which was held in this boat, like a kind of ship rave kind of situation. It was really awesome, and there were just so many cool people demoing what they're doing or giving experiences of things they'd gone through where their privacy had been in jeopardy, and why privacy is important. So definitely the cypherpunk manifesto runs stronger through Europe than maybe other regions. In Canada, Canada seems to be a place that kind of got woken up around the Freedom Convoy. There's even news lines coming out now at the moment. Somebody this week from the Freedom Convoy just got debanked again. So that hasn't finished. That saga hasn't gone away for the people who were very involved in it. And obviously the choke point is their finances. So Canada, Bitcoin is a freedom tool from being debanked. The US are looking at White House and Bitcoin treasury companies, and all the events that are around these kind of address those concerns of the people. So an American event is different from a Canadian event, is different from a Prague event, is different from an El Salvador event. And that becomes a great reason to go to all these events, first of all, because they're very diverse. Even though their subject is Bitcoin, their approach is very diverse. But also, it's very inspiring when it comes to Bitcoin and what is Bitcoin and where's your place in Bitcoin and how can Bitcoin help you increase your quality of life, essentially. As you can see across the globe, and yourself as well, you're traveling a lot as well. Would you say there's that kind of fits with the narrative that Bitcoin is different across the globe, or do you find it's more similarities than differences?
I get it extremely also from the guests, because I have also guests from around the world on, and it's super interesting. I think European Bitcoiners are so focused on privacy because the government is spying so much. You have it, for example, in Africa, not that much. They don't care that much about the privacy aspect. They care more about, hey, can I transact in it? The grassroots medium of exchange things, because the currency sucks. So there's like, and it's generalized, as you said also in the beginning. So there's like different focus groups in different countries, and in America I find a lot of this treasury talk, a lot of like number graph technology talk, but still self-custody, and those things is also very important. I don't hear that much about privacy. I hear that more about that in Europe, but maybe like that can also like just be my subjective feeling. Maybe I just don't find the right Americans on that topic. So it definitely is. And if you look at history, when we see something developing and something being adopted, it's in different places at different times, right? We have electricity. You having electricity, I have electricity, but there are places where there's no electricity. Like that's a reality. We have internet, but there are places where there's still no internet. And the same with Bitcoin. It's not only that how it gets adopted, but like there are places where there's probably cities and small areas where there's no Bitcoin at all, probably in the small cities and areas where there's also no electricity and no internet. So I think in general, we always talk about like worldwide adoption and all those things, but it moves in different speeds and in different areas of the
Yeah.
world. And then I think that's like North Korea probably has, I don't know how much Bitcoin adoption they have, and then how does this compare to the adoption of Bitcoin in the States or in Canada. So we all move differently. And this is the thing, like I think I told that a few times already in the podcast, but this was the reason why I wanted to do the podcast in English. Because if we do it just in German, I talk to German people, Austrian people, and Switzerland people, and to some Germans and Austrian Switzerland people that live somewhere else. But that's it. So, and I can talk to them also on an English speaking podcast, because most of them actually speak nice English, so I can like nice understandable English, so I can talk to them too. And now with English I can talk to Africans, I can talk to Canadians, Australians, Americans, Indians, all of them. And it's different for everyone, like and you really get a nice diverse view of like what Bitcoin actually is. And it's super hard to summarize for different states, but yeah, it's super interesting how different kind of states are different, have different focus groups. One small thing that I want to add is I know Germany is really obsessed with sovereignty and privacy, and I think that's why you also see, I think it's, if you look at the full node operators, I think Germany is number 2 or 3, even though it's not that big of a country. Like if you compare it to the States, like States is way bigger than Germany. And still in Germany, there's like a bunch of people that run full nodes.
Yeah, yeah. I think the kind of take that people have on Bitcoin is maybe from two things. It's probably like the identity of the people whoever the people may be. They might be across borders, but like the German speaking people or the North Europeans are very node runnery because they're very like engineer. They like solutions. They like to identify technical aspects. So, like shout out to the Netherlands and Germany and places like this who are really doing a really great job of not the mining side, but the securing the network on the node side. And there's a lot of node runners. I had a great time meeting the node runners kind of collective as well. They do a great job, and they're very like they live. Um, Everyone says you live on a Bitcoin standard and stuff, but they live a Bitcoin culture, which is really cool. They have like a very like deep grained way of living out the Bitcoin culture in the actions they do, but also I think so. I think it's like a reflection of the people, but I also think it's a reflection of the government under which they're subjected. So America, they're looking for to protect their constitutional rights, and they see Bitcoiners falling under one of those, and they also want to lobby, and they believe in the checks and balances kind of aspect of policy. So that's why we've got a lot of Bitcoiners wearing shirts and ties at the moment and trying to go to Washington or get on these panels on CNBC or whatever, so they can try and do their thing. But yeah, even from like a Czech point of view as well, like ex-communist countries have a totally different take on Bitcoin to non-ex-communist countries. That definitely plays a big part in how people see Bitcoin. Generationally, they've inherited a lot of political baggage from their governments, and that reflects in things. So I think it's a mix of who the people are and which government's been ruling the people for too long. And that kind of gives way to their thirst for Bitcoin, which expresses itself in different ways. But to come back to what you said about speaking in English or German, Bitcoin is kind of a language as well. It's not just it is a cultural move, but also I kind of see it like a language. It is a protocol. It is something that we can talk about between ourselves and communicate upon. It's almost like our second language. And that's why we like to go to the events, is because we can practice our second language. But it's like a global language. It's a global financial language. I kind of see it like a financial Esperanto. You know this language Esperanto that they made after the Second World War, and they were like, hey, like one of the problems with the Second World War was that we couldn't communicate with neighboring cultures and communities. So let's try and invent a universal language. So they made Esperanto. It's quite similar to Portuguese, I think. But the idea was that everybody would speak it. But they didn't want to give it their first language, so they saw it as like a threat to their identity. But if it had been marketed differently, if you'd have said, okay, Esperanto is going to be everybody's second language, so we'll all be able to speak to each other on a second language. And Bitcoin offers that. It offers us a way to be able to speak to each other, or at least transact with each other, which is an interaction. A transaction is an interaction. So through Bitcoin, we have this global protocol which allows us to be able to interact with each other and transact with each other, no matter what our kinfolk is, no matter where we're from as a people, as a culture, and no matter what government we've been subjected to for too long. So this is the frictionless aspect of Bitcoin being a global protocol, that no matter what countries and what governments and what cultures they came from, when I went to each one of these events, Bitcoin was a unifying factor, and Bitcoin was the same wherever. It didn't adopt a different style. So yeah, it's part of the fun of being able to have this thread in common with people who are so different.
Do you think that it's just an interesting thought that I had now, but do you think that language might follow the same trajectory than currency kind of follows, where we have many different currencies now, we have many different languages now, and at some point, because of globalization, internet, and coming closer together as a human species on the world, that we kind of slowly, but like very slowly, get to like have like maybe three languages, and like most of them, like 99% of the people just speak like those three big languages, maybe like English for the Western world, and then maybe Chinese, and maybe like Hindi or something like that. I mean, even Hindi, they speak really good English. For Indian people speak really good English, especially the new ones, way better than the Europeans. But like there's this centralizing or like unifying aspect of the internet and globalization for language. I mean, I live in Austria, and like 95% of my life is English because my girlfriend speaks English with me. My job is almost purely in English. I have 3 freelancers, and only one of them speaks German. so every aspect of me is English. Even though I'm residing in Austria, and my native language is German. So it kind of just made me think right now when you spoke about Bitcoin and language that we might like have in 100, 200, 500 years, maybe just like 2, 3 languages across the world.
I think that's the way it was certainly heading. If we look at globalization as being like a homogenization kind of effect, it kind of dilutes cultures and makes them very, very similar and bleeds the lines. Even like, obviously, if we're talking about language being from the UK, I'm obviously at the apex of that homogenization, right? It's kind of like a key factor historically and from a colonization point of view. But I think ever since maybe, especially at like the birth of global technology, such things as the internet and computers, like it's accelerated globalization without a doubt. You were talking about working with your freelancers. I'm talking with you right now over a podcast from Austria over to Canada. Bull Bitcoin, we don't have offices, so all my colleagues, we work virtually, and it does have like I can take like Bull Bitcoin as a great example. Bull Bitcoin was founded in Montreal by Francis Pouliot, who is a French speaker natively. That's his mother tongue is French, but also very bilingual, living in Montreal. But the key core first employees of Bull Bitcoin were either French speakers from France who were living in Canada or French Canadians living here in Quebec. And as the team grew and grew and grew, it got to about like maybe about a certain number where as soon as we expanded through France into Europe, but as soon as we expanded into Mexico and started gaining colleagues from the rest of Canada, the company, instead of speaking French, would speak English. So now most of our meetings are in English. So even Bull Bitcoin's been kind of subject to that type of like, as things grow and scale across the planet, you'll default to the language of least resistance. It's the network effect. As the network grows, it'll use the quickest vehicle to get things done. So that's still happening. 2025, definitely. English is dominating as a language and growing. Other languages are growing, but I think maybe the top 5 languages are eating the lunches of the smaller languages. So there are languages which are dying, which is a shame, really, because language is culture, language is identity, and language is people. So I'd like to think, this might get a bit further out there, but I'm always very optimistic on what Bitcoin can do. Some people say overly, but I think Bitcoin can kind of reduce globalization aspects. I think eventually, if we have money working for us and we don't need to leave our villages to work in the cities, we don't need to leave our countries to work in a different country for economic reasons, essentially. That's why a lot of people have to move to leave their native language or leave their hometown or leave their village or leave their country is economic. But if people adopt Bitcoin and economics start to work in their favor locally, then hopefully they can nourish a bit more of their local culture as well and not be dependent on external factors. Like a phrase that I've been kicking around in my head for a while, I'm rewatching Silicon Valley because I really liked that TV show. But like there's always little tech phrases that kind of come out of that show and stick in my head for a good few weeks. And one of them recently is think globally, act locally. And I think Bitcoin will allow us to do that. It'll allow us to think globally, but to act locally. And when we act locally, we're actually fighting against globalization. So if we look at really good adoption projects, I think the best ones I've seen have been in El Salvador. Everyone will think Bitcoin Beach, but in particular Berlin, the city of Berlin. It's very much a local adoption. And if we look at Costa Rica, where Francis lives in New Vita, Bitcoin Jungle, it's very much local. So in fact, Bitcoin adopts best locally rather than globally. We have to collaborate globally, but real adoption actually really happens on a local sense. So I think Bitcoin could probably protect minority languages in the future as a conclusion to that train of thought. I think it might be able to help us stay where we are and not have to uproot and lose culture. I think Bitcoin can protect culture.
Bitcoin is a big reason why I'm still in Austria. Like, because I think Bitcoin has a good force on the world where every country will politically, like most countries, will be a politically good country to be in. I think it we shown in the previous podcast that I just recorded, we've shown that Bitcoin is now the most correlated asset to the M2 money supply. And it might be like a long-winded argument now, but I think that because we now have an asset where it kind of shows the politicians and the money printers, or like if you do too much, like people will flee to this other system, to this parallel system. And as we know from Linol, nothing stops the strain, so they will still keep printing money. This is a trend that is really not like returnable, reversible. And in that sense, because we have that alarm system now of politicians and central bankers printing money, I do think that politicians are, weirdly enough, because of Bitcoin, forced to act more responsibly and implement policies that are in favor for the individual. And maybe that's just me dreaming, but I really think that Bitcoin will have an extremely positive impact on politics all around the world where Bitcoin is getting adopted. So obviously it won't have a huge impact right away on countries like North Korea, where maybe Bitcoin adoption is not that big. But on countries like, and there's a big grassroots adoption happening in Europe, as you know, and I'm also interested in how you see, because Bull Bitcoin, I think you entered Europe not that long ago. It was like half a year or something like that ago.
Towards the end of 2024.
Yeah, it's like a little bit more than half a year now. So I'm interested in that also. But like, the overall thing is like, I think Bitcoin, where it's active in that country, will actually act as an alarming system for politicians. And that M2 money supply correlation right now is just like one small indication for me that this might actually be the case, where we are now coming already close to that. If you print a lot of money, this just goes to Bitcoin. And then the central bankers at some point be like, yeah, we are just printing money into Bitcoin if we print money. Like we just increased the Bitcoin market cap and the Bitcoin adoption with that. We print new Bitcoiners exactly with that. And so it might actually be true that like then politics get better across the world. And then to your point back, people don't have a reason to move if it's a nice place to be in, and if they can work from everywhere. Like if I can stay where I grew up and I can work globally with everyone as I do right now, like why would I move away from my family? Like that seems ridiculous.
Yeah, I there's a couple of parts to it. In terms of to your first part, which is the government has to listen to us. When it's almost like, the classic Tom Hanks Captain Phillips meme, I am the captain now. Essentially, Bitcoin is what Christine Lagarde called the escape hatch. What are we escaping? Well, we're actually escaping that power dynamic, which is that they tell us what to do and we have no choice. We'll complain that we vote every 4 or 5 years and nothing changes, and the politicians make empty promises, and they just indebt us more and more and more and pass it on to the future generations. Like, that's how it's been.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.